There is a truth men rarely speak out loud, but it lives in their eyes, in their touch, in the way their energy shifts around certain women. It is not simply beauty that draws them in. It is something deeper, more mysterious, and far more powerful. It is the quiet, magnetic pull of a woman who knows herself, who embodies something he cannot name, yet cannot ignore. The essence of what stirs deep desire in a man begins not with appearance, but with presence, the kind that cannot be faked or forced, only discovered and allowed. When a woman becomes deeply aligned with her own feminine essence, she begins to radiate a certain vitality that goes far beyond physical attraction. This radiance is not about makeup, fashion, or smiles meant to please. It is the result of a woman who knows who she is, who has felt both her light and her shadows, and walks with the grace of someone who has returned to her core. This inner alignment creates a field around her that is magnetic, a kind of invisible pull that awakens something ancient in the male psyche. Men may not understand it consciously, but they are profoundly moved by it, reaches into their unconscious and stirs the archetype of the anima, the feminine figure that represents emotional, instinctive, and creative aspects of the soul. When a man encounters a woman in this state of authenticity, he does not merely experience lust, he feels summoned. This summoning is not loud or dramatic. It is silent, yet undeniable. It is as if something within him knows that in her presence he might encounter a part of himself that has long been sleeping. This kind of woman does not posture or try to perform her femininity. She does not need to rely on external validation to feel worthy. She simply is. Her softness is not a mask. It is a strength. Her sensuality is not a performance. It is an extension of how connected she is to her body, her emotions, her intuition. This authenticity is what creates a profound polarity between masculine and feminine energy. The more rooted she is in herself, the more space there is for the man to feel drawn into that space, not because she is demanding it, but because she holds it. And in the presence of that held space, a man feels something awaken that is both primal and sacred. He becomes not just a pursuer, but a participant in something larger than the physical, something mythic. He feels that to be with her is to step into a dimension where his instincts, his protectiveness, and his desire all converge into purpose. There is a wildness and a calm in her energy, a kind of paradox that cannot be explained but only felt. She does not chase, she attracts. She does not beg, she blesses. The man, sensing this, becomes more than a body seeking pleasure. He becomes a soul seeking union, not necessarily commitment or long-term partnership, but a moment of deep surrender to that which is beautiful, real, and alive. Her energy makes him feel both safe and excited, grounded and elevated, raw and refined. This is not about sexual technique or physical availability. It is about the aliveness of her spirit and the unconscious promise that to touch her is to touch something eternal. And in that silent promise, the man's desire begins to burn. A man is drawn to mystery not because he wants confusion, but because his unconscious craves something sacred that cannot be immediately possessed. What arouses him most deeply is not full exposure, but the slow unveiling of depth. When a woman carries layers within her, when her soul speaks through silences, and her emotions carry shadows not fully understood, she activates in him the archetype of the seeker. He doesn't always know what he's searching for, but he feels compelled to follow. The feminine that keeps something held back, not out of manipulation, but out of genuine depth, is the feminine that he cannot reduce to a single image. Her emotional world, filled with nuance, contradiction, beauty, and pain becomes a terrain that invites exploration. She is not always easily interpreted, and this draws his soul even more, for in her presence he senses the vastness of something that cannot be mastered, only witnessed and slowly approached. This kind of mystery is not cold or detached. It is warm, but elusive. It is the gaze that holds something unspoken, the voice that reveals sincerity while hinting at unspoken layers. A man encounters this and begins to project his fantasies, his longings, his fears. She becomes the canvas for what he most wants to believe exists. A woman who cannot be owned, only earned. And in that psychological distance, where everything is not revealed too soon, his desire sharpens. The lack of immediate clarity keeps him attentive. He begins to watch more closely, listen more deeply, feel more intensely. He becomes alert, alive, and slightly unsettled, which is exactly the condition where desire thrives. In this state, he is not just engaging with the body, he is dancing with a mystery. He senses that within her lies not just pleasure, but the key to something he has not yet known in himself. When a woman allows herself to be mysterious in this way, she is not withholding love or affection. She is honoring the sacredness of her inner world. She does not spill her whole soul at once, not because she lacks trust, but because she knows that her inner depth deserves reverence. She becomes like the hidden well in the forest, invisible only to those who take the time to walk beyond the obvious path. This slow revelation draws the man into his instincts, but also into his soul. He must go deeper. He must question his own readiness. He must engage from a place beyond superficial hunger, and it is there, in that space of psychological and emotional pursuit, that his arousal takes root. Not as a fleeting impulse, but as a persistent pull. Her mystery becomes not a barrier but a bridge, leading him not just toward her, but toward the deeper dimensions of his own masculinity. And in this quiet, sacred tension, desire is born. Not loud, not aggressive, but enduring and transformative, shaped not by exposure, but by the beauty of what remains just out of reach. There is a unique and profound force in the presence of a woman who carries both confidence and vulnerability in harmony. This combination awakens a man's desire on a level far deeper than physical attraction. He feels it not just in his body, but in his psyche, in the regions of himself that are wired to respond to truth rather than performance. Confidence alone can command respect, and vulnerability alone can evoke protection, but when the two are woven together, they generate a kind of psychological alchemy that magnetizes a man's attention and desire. A woman who walks into a room with the quiet strength of knowing her worth, yet holds enough softness to allow herself to be seen in her unguarded moments, creates a paradox that stirs the masculine soul. He does not just see her, he feels invited by her presence. Her vulnerability is not a plea for saving, nor is it a sign of weakness. It is an act of sacred openness, a message that says she is human, real, and unafraid of being touched emotionally. This kind of openness does not overwhelm a man, but awakens him. It gives him the psychological permission to lean into his own masculine energy, to rise into a role that is not about dominance, but about presence. He feels that she does not need him to complete her, but she welcomes him to join her, and that invitation, offered not through words but through emotional resonance, is deeply arousing because it places him not just in front of beauty, but in front of trust. Her willingness to be seen in her truth calls forth a kind of desire that is fused with reverence. It becomes more than sexual craving. It becomes a longing to protect, to penetrate not just the body, but the entire emotional landscape she reveals. She does not seek validation from him, yet she allows space for his energy to enter. She does not play helpless, but she also does not armor herself to appear invulnerable. This balance is rare. It requires emotional maturity and self-awareness. When a man encounters it, he instinctively feels that he is in the presence of a woman who is not trying to seduce him, but is instead inviting him to meet her where she truly is. And in this meeting place, the energy between them grows, not from manipulation, but from mutual recognition. Her self-possession becomes the ground upon which his desire builds, and her emotional exposure becomes the sky through which that desire soars. The tension between what is held and what is shared creates a living polarity, one that draws him toward her again and again, not because he is addicted to her body, but because he is magnetized by the richness of her emotional world. And in that space where her vulnerability meets her confidence, he sees something holy, something erotic, something eternal. A man's sexual desire is profoundly awakened, not by what a woman does for him, but by how she responds to his presence. It is in the subtle and deeply psychological realm of receptivity that his masculine energy finds its purpose and expression. When a woman is open, not just physically but emotionally and energetically, to a man's presence, he feels seen in a way that few experiences in life can replicate. This receptivity is not submission, nor is it passive compliance. It is a conscious and embodied state of allowing, of accepting the energy of the masculine without resistance or fear. In this space, a man begins to feel that his essence is welcomed. He is not being tolerated or analyzed or corrected. He is being received, and in that reception something deep within him awakens. His sexual desire becomes an offering, not just an urge. He longs to pour himself into that openness, to merge with the feminine field that calls him forward. This kind of receptivity is rare, because it requires a woman to be at peace with herself and her own desires. She must have enough internal grounding to not only allow a man in, but to remain connected to herself in the process. When she does, her presence becomes like an open temple, sacred, inviting, and alive. Her body language, her eyes, the way she listens, even the space she holds between words, all communicate that she is not closing herself off in fear, nor collapsing in need. She is holding space, and this space becomes the very thing that arouses the masculine desire to enter, to explore, to give. A man does not always understand why he feels this way around a particular woman, but at a deep level, he senses that in her presence, his energy is not only allowed, it is meaningful. It has a place, a function, a welcome. What this does to his psyche is powerful. It calms the part of him that feels constantly at odds with the world. It soothes the places where he has had to perform, compete, and conquer. In her presence, he does not have to strive to be a man. He simply is one, and in being seen and welcomed as such, his desire flows more freely. He feels not only erotic longing, but emotional safety, and in this safety, his passion deepens. Her receptivity becomes the canvas upon which his masculinity can express itself without distortion. She does not have to act seductively or pretend to be interested. Her true, embodied openness is enough to signal to him that his presence matters. And that signal, transmitted not through words but through the energy of the moment, stirs in him the desire to give fully, to touch not just her skin, but her soul. This fusion of receptivity and masculine recognition creates a dynamic where physical intimacy becomes a deeply spiritual act, not through effort, but through presence. In that space, sexual desire is no longer separate from love. It becomes its language. The voice and the gaze are among the most potent instruments of human connection, especially when it comes to the realm of sexual desire. For a man, arousal is not solely triggered by the body he sees or the touch he receives, but often by the energetic and emotional communication that flows through these nonverbal channels. A woman's gaze, when it is present, alive, and emotionally engaged, becomes more than just a look. It becomes a mirror into her soul. It tells him if she sees him, if she desires him, if she is truly there. When a man is met with a gaze that does not just observe but receives, holds, and reflects, he feels a current of energy moving through him that words cannot create. This feeling goes deeper than excitement. It moves into psychological hunger. It speaks to something ancient within him that longs to be recognized without being spoken to directly. The gaze that lingers, that holds a slight softness, curiosity, or playfulness, sends signals into his unconscious mind, igniting fantasies and emotions that can rarely be controlled. The voice functions in a similar way. A woman who is attuned to her own emotional world and speaks not just with words but with feeling, tone, rhythm, and pause creates an atmosphere of magnetism. It is not about having a sweet or seductive voice, but about communicating aliveness through it. The tone that carries vulnerability, interest, or quiet confidence has the power to awaken a man's full attention. He hears not only what she says, but what she means, what she feels, and what she might be holding back. And it is in this subtle interplay between what is spoken and what is hinted at that desire builds. Her voice can become like a song his nervous system wants to hear more of, especially when she allows silence to punctuate her words. That silence is not empty. It is charged. It invites him to lean in, to guess, to reach. And that act of reaching, of wondering, of being slightly uncertain, keeps his mind and body engaged in the pursuit of her energy. This interplay between gaze and voice becomes a form of erotic intelligence. It does not rely on overt sexuality. It is not calculated or fake. It arises when a woman is fully present, emotionally aware, and attuned to the moment. Through her eyes and voice, she offers glimpses into her world, sometimes playful, sometimes serious, sometimes teasingly vague. These glimpses act as emotional foreplay, awakening his instincts not only to touch her, but to understand her, to explore her depth, to feel chosen by her gaze and moved by her sound. What arouses him most is that these gestures feel alive, spontaneous, and real. They draw him in without force, make him feel desired without control, and offer him the promise that her mind and soul are just as inviting as her body. In that space of deep communication without full exposure, his desire is ignited and sustained. A woman who is deeply in love with herself, who moves through the world as if her body is sacred and her presence is meaningful, awakens in a man a type of desire that transcends surface-level lust. This self-love is not arrogance, nor is it self-obsession. It is the quiet reverence with which she dresses, touches, and carries herself. It is the subtle sensuality present in how she pours her tea, how she places her hand on her chest when she speaks, how she walks as if each step is a conversation with the earth. When a man observes this kind of woman, he sees not just someone attractive, but someone already full. She is not waiting to be completed or validated. She is overflowing. That fullness, that wholeness, is what magnetizes him. He becomes drawn not only to her physicality, but to the energy she emits, an energy that feels like fire wrapped in velvet, tender yet untouchable. In her relationship with her body, she demonstrates to the world how she expects to be touched, seen, and cherished. She does not seek to prove her worth, because she lives as though she already knows it. Her skin is not simply a surface, but a landscape she respects. Her sensuality is not confined to the act of intimacy. It is embedded in the way she moves, breathes, and expresses. She dresses not to impress, but to express. Her choices reflect care, presence, and subtle devotion to beauty, not external beauty imposed by trends, but the inner beauty of harmony and intentionality. This expression of sensual self-respect does something profound to the male psyche. It signals that she is not available to be consumed, but is available to be met, mirrored, and honored. She becomes not a passive object of desire, but an active invitation to step into something higher, something more conscious. When a woman lives in this kind of sensual awareness, she becomes an embodiment of Eros. Not just sexuality, but the life force itself. Her existence communicates joy, depth, and presence. A man who encounters her does not simply think of touching her. He dreams of entering her world. He imagines what it would be like to be chosen by her, not because she needs him, but because she desires to share what is already abundant within her. Her touch with herself, the way she massages lotion into her skin, the way she closes her eyes to enjoy the sunlight, these things are not lost on him. He registers them, even if he cannot explain why. His body responds, his mind lingers, his emotions stir. In that energy of self-loving sensuality, she becomes a living altar to pleasure, not because she performs it for others, but because she honors it within herself. And in witnessing this sacred self-union, a man feels pulled not to dominate or control, but to approach with wonder, reverence, and longing. She becomes not just desirable, but unforgettable, not because she chased him, but because she showed him what it looks like to belong fully to oneself. What most deeply arouses a man is not a performance, not perfection, and not even the promise of physical pleasure. It is the invitation into a presence that feels alive, a soul that feels layered, and a feminine energy that is both open and self-contained. It is the gaze that sees without needing, the voice that moves without demanding, the body that walks in harmony with itself. When a woman becomes rooted in her own radiance, mystery, vulnerability, receptivity, expression, and sensual self-love, she does not chase desire. She becomes the source of it. She awakens not just the man's body, but his deeper nature, and in that sacred awakening something timeless is remembered. A longing not only for union, but for truth, depth, and the kind of love that does not begin in the flesh, but ends there as a celebration of everything deeper.